Here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Incomplete Skeptic. Here we ask you to do what I call the set-aside prayer or the set-aside contention. We ask you to forget everything you think you know so you can learn something new. It's part of having the courage of your convictions, but more to have the imperative to question your convictions. We move from important to critical, and our freedom, I think, comes to us through the question more than the answer. I've seen people that when they get the answer, they quit asking questions and they think they know everything and they can't learn. So no one goes to college by just walking in and telling the teacher what they're going to tell them, and that's the end of the story. It's kind of silly. So it's good to be a critical thinker, but don't be a complete skeptic. That's what the Incomplete Skeptic's about. And today it is my honor and privilege to introduce our guest, Nicole Kerr. She is an author, healer, speaker, and all-around intelligent woman who fully deserves our consideration. She authored her book, one among many, You Are Deathless. That'll be our focus today, is her book and her story surrounding an NDE and the lessons, of course, emanating from it. Nicole, welcome to the Incomplete Skeptic.
Thank you so much, Timothy. I'm absolutely delighted and excited to be on your show, and I know we're going to have a very productive, enlightening conversation.
We are following the light. So before you actually begin your story proper, why don't we look into one two-pronged question here. First off, why did you return to join us here in Earth School after dying? Because so many people I've heard say they don't want to come back, and they get in this little argument with God or whoever it is that they're encountering, their spirit guides, etc. And secondly, after coming back, why did you write your book, You Are Deathless?
Those are two fabulous questions. And I am one of those that did not want to come back. And I will tell you, the reason I didn't want to come back is I was on the other side. And when you experience the other side, that there's no negative in any way, shape, or form. There's no fear. There's no punishment. There's nothing like that. It's only this absolute loving kindness and just beauty. It's hard to want to go back to earth. And I could see my body in the ditch. We have to remember that our eyes, when we're in soul form, and when I say soul form, we have to also remember we're all energy. And so upon death, our energy body cracks open from top down and our soul leaves us, and it'll go to the other side, heaven, whatever you want to call it. And so we don't have the eyes that we have in human form, of course. Our eyes are more translucent and can see 360 and can see present time and future time. There's no time over there, but it can see everything collectively. And so I could see that I was mangled pretty bad and I was going to have a lot of severe physical injuries. I also knew that my parents were we grew up in a very disciplined home, very religious home in the South. My dad was in the Marines. So I did not want to return back to that bubble of being put back into a situation where I was being told what to do, how to do it, what to believe again. And the third reason I didn't want to come back is I just didn't know how my life was going to play out based on the accident and the support that I was going to have and how much pain I was going to be in. So why trade all of that when you've got none of that where you're at? But I was told in the book, I call him Casper the Friendly Ghost, because that was the angel that came down and took me to the other side. But I found out last year it's actually a deceased loved one of mine, my grandfather on my paternal side. And he came to me in August when he passed away at age 58, massive heart attack. And I was 58. And he said, now is the time for you to understand that I was your angel that came and picked you up. And I was like, oh my God, why didn't you tell me this before I wrote my book? And he said, because you needed to understand that this is the time, and you could see how short life is at only 58 years old, and how important it is to realize that deceased loved ones are on the other side. And I'd always heard that from other NDE stories, that they had met their deceased loved ones, and I just didn't have that experience until now. So he said, I'm going to always be with you, Nicole, and I'm going to protect you until you actually do pass away again. And he has been there for me. He is my call him my military angel. He has protected me in some circumstances that I didn't think I would live again, that I have faced in the 40 years since the crash. So I didn't want to come back, but I was told, you have a mission. And my mission was given directly to me by Spirit after my memory returned of my NDE 20 years after the actual event. The only thing I had remembered at the event was bright white lights. That was it. And the message Spirit told me was, do not be afraid of death. And I'm like, that's a pretty big message. How in the world am I supposed to get that out to people? And, it seems like a quite simple message, Timothy, but it's taken me almost 4 decades to understand what that looks like for me. And now I understand that purpose. And that is why I wrote the book, You Are Deathless, because I understand it. I needed to get into alignment with my body, soul, spirit, and mentally. So mind, body, spirit, and soul, all 4 of those in alignment in order to be grounded, and to also bring in that part of wellness that we typically do not discuss, which is spiritual wellness. And that is an important part of healing that even the World Health Organization puts in their wellness wheel, that we in the wellness industry we don't discuss it, unfortunately. But that is crucial to healing. And we can talk later about that. But I figured one of the best ways to get the message out was to write a book. Now, I come from a science background, so I worked at the Centers for Disease Control. I knew how to write scientifically. If you know anything about writing for journals from a science perspective is totally different than writing a book about your emotions, your story, your experience. And it took me 13 years to write this book. And it is from my heart. It's authentic. I didn't care if I offended anybody in my family or otherwise. I spoke my truth. And that went against the religion I was raised with, which was Southern Baptist and Lutheran. But I didn't care, because they are giving us belief systems that are not true. They're instilling fear in us, a lot of these religious organizations and other organizations that are not of God. God is love, period, not fear. That is totally a man-made concept, just like the words bad and good. Those are earth terms that we created on earth in order to evaluate ourselves and others. On the other side, they don't exist. It's all amazing. So, fear is a low vibration. It keeps you in that fight, flight, fear, amygdala part of your brain. So you will not have clarity, and you will not make the decisions in your life that are for your highest and greatest good. You have got to deal with your fears and get into this prefrontal cortex where your executive thinking happens, so that you can start awakening and making the choices for your life that support why you came and what your evolutionary soul process is.
When I had cancer, I took the Power of 8 group, and I don't know if you've heard of that before, but part of it was affirmations. And you just reminded me of something. I didn't plan to say this, but I didn't use the 4 key elements that you referred to, but I part of my mantra was healthy, healed, and whole, body, mind, and soul. So I was feeling and picturing everything coming together, and I was very prayerful. And we had groups of 8. The Power of 8 was the 8 people in the group, and each week of the 8 weeks, one person would get the entire focus by everyone for a whole week. And I think that was part of the reason I was brought back. And, we don't leave until we're done transmitting the things that we need to transmit. And I remember standing in my backyard trying to decide if I was going to stay here or not. And I could see two spirits on the other side, ready to greet me up in this place that was full of light. And then where I was at was fine, but it's a very strange thing, but I don't know if you agree with this, but I kind of think when it's our time, we're gone. There's nothing. They could have an army there to try and save us. It's not going to happen. And if it's not our time, they could bring an army and we're not going anywhere, So,
well, and
yeah.
I completely agree with that, because 2 weeks after the crash, I was in the hospital 4 months and in the ICU for 7 weeks, very critical, life and death daily from all the injuries. And I was taken into emergency surgery 2 weeks after the crash. They were performing a colostomy along with some other things. And I coded code blue, which means you're going into cardiac arrest, and they could not get my heart going again. So they actually called the time of death, went and told my parents that they needed to plan my funeral, and they were so sorry. And the thing is, my heart started back 2 minutes later on its own. And it was my angel James going, "You're not going back to the light." I was trying to get back to that light again. And he said, "No, you're getting back in that body. You have got a mission." And so it is interesting how things can happen like that. And it's not within our control. Control is an illusion. And so many of us that have had trauma, and like for so long before my memory came back, my life was lived with this need to control, hypervigilance around safety. I'm going to drive the car because it was a car crash and I was not the driver, and the driver happened to be drunk. So I'm going to put as much effort into controlling situations to keep me safe. And actually, that just stressed me out even more and caused my PTSD to escalate. But I didn't know any different then. I just thought it was up to me to try to control those situations, instead of realizing, no, it is totally up to spirit. And spirit has that power to bring you back from the dead and to quote dead. And even at this scene of my accident, I was clinically dead 10 to 13 minutes. So, it's, I have been brought back enough to know, okay, this is the message, to get out to people, not to fear death, because so many people have grown up in America and other countries where religious organizations have instilled the wrath of God as fear-based. You're going to hell if you don't follow these rules, and every organization has a different set of rules. And I tell people all the time, they go, is there a hell? And I go, hell no, there is not. Hell is on earth. It is what is happening in Gaza and Israel and these war-torn countries where people, have hardly anything to eat, and they're just surviving in a tent, and never knowing when another blast is coming. I said, or you're in addiction and you're in such hell in that addiction and you can't get out of it. So we suffer and we are in pain, and a version of what I would call hell here. It's not something we go to. It exists here. But yet these religions try to scare us, thinking if we don't do what they say, that we're not going to, ascend and meet God. And I completely disagree with that. And what my experience actually on the other side, when I left my body, I'm going to read this because this is how I put it in the book. When I left my body, God had been all around me. God was in me, God was me, and I was God. God was presence and fullness and oneness. And most of all, God was love. Pure, no strings attached. That means unconditional. I'm going to say that again. No strings attached, open arms, love. And in that state, I had not suddenly received forgiveness from a stern father, which I had and still have, for my mistakes. My mistakes just didn't exist. They never had. So think about that. They never had. Nothing I had done on earth needed to be weighed or measured. The life I had just left behind told a story, yes, but just one of many that I have lived in different realms. I honestly felt like an astronaut floating in outer space, filled with awe and wonder. And it's interesting that the word fear, if you look it up, Timothy, in the 1600s with the King James Version, it actually meant awe and reverence. And that's what most NDEs describe, this feeling, the light, even the white, clear light, that most of us experience, as awe and reverence and wonder. And that is the energy, the presence of God. And so we've twisted the word fear over the decades and over the centuries into this fear, this scary notion. And so, it's just, it's a shame, because that really was and is the closest you can get to a description on the other side. We just don't have the words for how amazingly beautiful and wonderful it is there.
I think it fits into the model you're describing to say that forgiveness runs deeper than the offense that requires its presence. And without the so-called offense, you can't get to the forgiveness. But what if you get to the point in your life to where you're not upset about everybody and everything, and there's nothing to forgive anymore, And it's like a great place to be. And some people have to go through that whole huge, long process, or you can be instantaneous. But we don't know. We don't. We would do better if we know better, I suppose. But I remember telling someone who I love that God is love. This was many, many years ago, and he said, "Well, God is love, but God is much more than love." I said, "No, God is love, and if it's not about love, it's not about God. It's just that simple." And I don't try to push religion or non-religion on anyone. I'm open-minded, and I think God talks to us all differently, sometimes in the language of an atheist. So to me, we're all capable of love. We're all capable of forgiveness and all these higher things. But sometimes we have to go through something to get there, and it's kind of weird that we build all these processes when all we want to do is be free, but we make up all these things about why life is supposed to be hard and I have to overcome everything. And I know I'm going on a bit much here, Nicole, but that was partly what attracted me to your story, is you're talking about love, and people even need to hear the word unconditional love instead of just the word love, because they have all these weird things built around the word itself. We don't even have to qualify it as being conditional or unconditional, because love is love, but people need that extra little nudge,
Yeah.
and just to kind of remind each other who we actually are, and I think if people would really study your book and get very quiet and be listening to their inner spirit, they could glean some of the lessons that you're talking about here today and help, I guess, co-sign the reason that you came back, and there's nothing to fear with death. That's like saying you're afraid of being alive.
Well, and we have a death denial culture here. I mean, in my opinion, we don't want to talk about it. It's morbid. We don't want to prepare for it. We don't want to think about it. We don't think it's going to happen to us. I mean, I certainly didn't think it was going to happen to me at age 19 years old. That was the furthest thing from my mind. But the truth is, we honestly do not know when our last day on earth is going to be. And if we actually lived with that awareness, we would be more present, more mindful, more loving, more kind, and we would live in a deeper way. And that is something that, being in the present and keeping that in the back of your mind, I'm sure that those people that were on that bridge that just collapsed in the news, there's at least 6 people dead so far from that. They didn't think that they were going to die crossing a bridge, that a ship was going to hit it, the same thing with all these mass shootings that are going on. These kids are going to school thinking they're going to come home, they're going to play ball, they're going to see their parents, and it doesn't happen. So we don't do a good job in this country, in my opinion, of talking about death. And this is also for children as well, especially if you're a single parent. I know there was a time when my sister's husband passed away and the boys were 10 and 14. And they said, Mommy, you're not going to die, are you? And of course she said, No, of course I'm not. And, I kind of pushed her on it. And I said, you really don't know that. You have no guarantee. You do the best you can to stay healthy, and you can tell them, I'm healthy, I plan to stay that way. But you really don't know what the future holds. And so, in my opinion, I know you're trying to protect the child, but you're also giving them false hope, because it could happen that something happens to you, whether you pass away or you become incapacitated and can't be their mother anymore. They need to know, if that happened, this is what's going to happen to you. You're going to go live with Uncle James and Aunt Nicole. You're going to be taken care of financially. You need to know that could possibly happen. I don't intend for it to. I don't think it will, but that's the truth. But we don't do that. We try to shield them and protect them. And then if something does happen, they lose complete trust in the truth and complete trust in what anybody says anymore. So it really is a part of my vocation now. I call myself an eternality advocate. Now, William Faulkner used that word, so it is a real word. I looked it up, and it is that sense of that state of being that you are everlasting. And that is what I want people to understand, is your soul is everlasting. And it goes on and on and on. Know your physical shell here, vessel that is the human form, is going to die. And that is sad. It really is. I don't want to take that away from people, is the 3D that we're living in. It has the emotions of grief and suffering and all of that. But we have to remember the bigger cosmic context of what is going on here in dying, and be more aware of it, and the benevolence of it, and greater compassion for it. So I think if people started to awaken to who they really are, I mean, we get spiritual amnesia when we're born, right? We forget who we really are. We have forgotten where we came from, who we are, this infinite, powerless, I don't want to say limitless, radiant, glorious, eternal being. And it takes most of us our entire lifetime to remember that, or we don't, and we have to come back and learn that lesson again. So our culture has focused a lot on mind and body, how especially in America, how important your looks are, your physical body is, and mind, we reward the intellect, instead of people putting at least half of that energy and effort and resources into developing a relationship with their soul and their spirit.
What's your take on synchronicities? Because when you're giving the example of your friend who told her son she wasn't going to die, I just saw a movie last night where this young person was arguing with his dad, and he said, well, you told me that mom wasn't going to die, that she's going to be okay, and she died. So, yeah, But I thought, sounds like a very similar story, and the dad went silent because, yeah, that's what he said, and yeah, now she's gone. So I live by synchronicities pretty much, and that's partly what I liked about your story, because I kept seeing things in your story that aligned with my life in so many ways. All the way from the people pleaser to you name it, as this is your time, not mine. But I'm just saying it was really important to me to say, okay, I'm supposed to focus on this person, whether or not you agreed to be on the show, right? So, and I'm so glad that you said, oh, sure, I'll do that. And But what's your take on synchronicities? Do you believe in them, or are they just a construct of the human intellect, nothing
Oh,
more?
no, I absolutely believe in it because we are all energy at our core. Okay. And one of the lessons, there's 10 major lessons I talk about in the book from NDEs that not only I experienced, but hundreds of thousands of other NDEers. So there is a science component in my book as well, which was important for me to put that piece in as well. So it's coming from the International Association of Near-Death Studies, and everyone and everything is connected. You think about that. We are all connected. And at the end of it all, the message is love and oneness on the other side. We're this huge, huge collective consciousness of oneness. And if you think about synchronicities and how things line up, especially when they happen with ease and grace, and that's why your intention and what you focus on is so important. And that's why it's important from a mental health perspective to have to let go of people who are toxic, who are negative, who are judgmental, and who do not support you. And I talk about that in my book because clearly, when this happened to me, and I will show you the car, I was a cadet at the United States Air Force Academy. I was in one of the first classes, and the only reason I was in there was to please my father. Okay. Worst mistake I ever made. That place was so abusive to me and to other people, but it was not my soul's path to go to a place to learn how to kill people. And that ultimately is what our military is about, is training people to go to war and to be able to defend our country. And I love our country. And I don't want to take anything away from the military in terms of people that are choosing that. And I'm grateful for that. But it is horrible that 22 veterans a day commit suicide in our country. I mean, that is inexcusable for a country of our wealth and our resources to be allowing that to happen. But what I will tell you from a soul perspective is our souls are not designed to deal with what you see in the battlefield at the theater and your best friend getting killed or parts of their body blown off or stuff that's, in the movies, but it's happening in real life. And you just can't make sense of it from a spiritual perspective, from a mental or emotional perspective. It completely causes something to happen in your body called soul loss. And I don't know if you're familiar with that term, Timothy, or soul fragmentation, but it's an important aspect of healing that we totally underestimate and don't talk about it. And I know that this is what is going on with a lot of veterans because there's not resources dedicated or people talking about how you need to get those soul pieces back together in order to be in alignment. And your soul fractures through trauma in order to protect you. And I wish I would have known this much sooner in my healing journey because I didn't get exposed to it until 2019 when I actually went to see a shaman. And he told me, Nicole, I've never seen anything like this. Your soul is cracked 30%. So you're consistently disassociating when you hit a trigger in your life. You fly out and you don't stay grounded here on earth. And it is keeping you from your work. It's keeping you from being present. There's a lot of things that will do. And I just want your audience to know, just like we have flesh wounds, I mean, I broke my pelvis, amputated my foot, my wrist. I had tons of injuries on the physical level. Those have to heal. You have flesh wounds. Then you have mental health wounds. Okay. In my case, my parents told the doctor when he said Nicole needs psychological and psychiatric help for this trauma. My mother and dad are very religious, and they looked at him and my mother said, Jesus is our counselor. She's going to be fine. Well, let me tell you, Jesus never came down and sat on the sofa. And I love Jesus, but he never came down on the sofa and said, Nicole, let's deal with your trauma. Okay. And so I didn't get that part treated. So if you don't get your trauma treated, your body's going to try to resolve it, and it's going to be in an unhealthy and negative way. And so what happened for me was I developed an eating disorder. As soon as my parents sent me to live with my sister, and I no longer had my mother to nurse me back to health and be my best friend, I went into a spiral. And eating disorders back in the 80s were not really known. It was called compulsive eating back then. And I would stuff tons of food in my mouth and then just feel so much shame. And even today, the shame that goes with that. And it not only happens with women, it happens with men. But the bottom line is you hate yourself at some level. Okay. And so I was told by my parents that I had caused the wreck because I got in the car with someone who was drunk. So they blamed me, even though I had nothing to do with I wasn't driving. The state of Colorado, there's nothing that the evidence shows Nicole did this. It was, I broke my father's rules. I was drinking, I had a cigarette, and I was with an upperclassman. And I have to say that was the first time in my life that I'd broken out of his rules and started to have fun. And as soon as I did, man, did I get slammed. And so, it's been hard for me because my mother and my father said that I basically deserved what I got, and that I disappointed them and I disappointed God. So I have had you want to talk about skepticism with God, I have had to have a whole reboot on my concept of God, because it looked nothing like the God that I grew up with in the Baptist and Lutheran churches. And it is taking me a long time to let those old belief systems go. They were never true, and they kept me in fear. And when my memory came back 20 years later and I remembered what I experienced was God, it still took me a while to let that settle in and be confident that that is my truth, because my entire family believes differently. They believe you have to have an external, you have to go through Jesus or some other means to get to God. And I was very clear that no, God is within us. You don't need an external anything to get to God. We are all eternal sparks of God. And we just need to remember that and start connecting with that. But it was, so that's the mental wound. And then there's the spiritual wound. Okay. And that's the soul loss. And there's 3 criteria, and I'm going to go through them real quick. The first one, the symptom, I should say, is I didn't want to come back. Okay. And there's a lot of people out there that you may talk to and they go, I don't want to be here. For whatever reason they're going through, they don't want to be on earth. And I knew this when I was on the other side. I didn't want to come back to my body and my life because I knew it would be filled with pain and suffering. And it has, for the most part. Secondly, a low-level, consistent feeling that something is missing. Now, it's interesting to note that in many compulsive behaviors and addictions, they fall into this statement. And for me, it was my eating disorder, now known as binge eating disorder. And I can clearly see the link of me having this sense of emptiness in my life. I no longer believed in God after the crash. I would pray for something in the hospital. It never happened. And so that's a really important symptom. If you are feeling that this, it'll come in as depression, what do I say, emptiness. There's just nothing there, And the third one is you just can't get over it. You're stuck. And I can relate to that because I've had chronic health conditions, some of them which just seem stuck. Like, why can't I move past my migraines? Or, for me, it was being hypervigilant about being safe, which is causing stretch, which is causing migraines, So, I think that's an important part that we don't talk about, that needs to be talked about. And people can find shamans, they can do hypnotherapy, they can, even if you know how to call back your soul parts, for yourself to get that integrated, or know somebody who knows how to do that. There's a lot of spiritual workers out there that are proficient in doing that. Just make sure they do know what they're doing. But soul retrieval is a very powerful tool in healing, and it works. And what we're dealing with, as you know, is the spiritual or the hidden realm. And I'm here to tell you, it's a very real thing. And then that's when my life, the spiritual part of my life, started really coming into focus, and I started connecting with my angels. We all have at least one guardian angel around us. We have to ask them for help because of free will. So do not think that they're not with you because you're not getting help from them. You have to ask them for help, even as something as small as a parking space. And people laugh at me all the time when I say, okay, angels, help me get a parking space. But Timothy, I swear I have never not gotten a parking space when I ask. So start trying to communicate with them and ask them simple things, and then you can start upping the ante and looking for evidence, and the evidence will appear. It may not, you have to be open-minded. It may not come like you think it's coming, but you will get an answer. So that is really important, to start the dialogue with your own soul. And one way to do that is, if you journal, I got this from Lee Harris, put at the top, what does my soul want to tell me today? And if you don't get anything, write it again tomorrow. What does my soul want to tell me today? And you do have to get quiet. That's what you were saying earlier about reading this book, to listen instead of always being informed and bombarded with information. To be inspired, you have to be still.
Silence and circumspection is one way I heard it. You said your grandfather on your paternal side was your guardian angel. And it's interesting. My grandpa on my maternal side is one of my guardian angels. I've sat at the table with all of them, and most of them are female. But my grandfather showed up to save me when he taught me how to whittle, and as a young person. And I took that whittling knife and stuck it into a socket, 220 volt socket, because I thought I couldn't be electrocuted, because wood on the handle couldn't allow the electricity to go through it. Yeah. And I was in kindergarten, and the teacher told us that it needs to be able to go through water and metal and the like. Well, my young mind didn't put it together that there's these two rivets holding the wood in place, and I had my thumb and finger pressed squarely over it. So I'm frozen. And I said, and I thought, oh God, I can't, I can't move, is what I was saying. And my brother said, do you want me to pull you away? And I'm glad he asked. And I said, no, because I said, no, don't touch me, and don't touch me, because I did remember the teacher saying the person who touches you will get it worse than what you're getting, possibly. And then I felt two heavy hands, one on each shoulder, and I was pulled back from the socket. And, I think that was the knife he gave me. And I didn't understand it as a child. I looked to my left and my right, nobody was there. And I asked my brother, I said, did you pull me back? And he couldn't have, because the hands were large, on my shoulders and strong, and pulled me back. And he said, no, because he's like younger than I was. And so it's kind of cool. We both have our grandpas doing the deal. I wonder if they're having conversations here. Oh, I'm so glad these two are talking,
Well, one of the things that came to me with my grandpa is, when he was on Earth, he was an alcoholic. And the guy that was driving in the car with me was an alcoholic. And so, when you go to the other side, that story part doesn't go with you. So it's interesting. He saw the abuse that I was going through at the academy. I mean, it was bad in the 80s, because women had just been admitted, and I didn't want to stay, but I couldn't quit as well, because in our family, failure or quitting something, especially something as prestigious as getting into, quote, one of the academies, just was not going to be acceptable. And I knew that. And so I just couldn't quit, but yet I wanted out. And so he could see what I was being subjected to. And he was like, I'm going to help you get out of this. Now, it was in a horrible way, but it did get me out of it. And I am now a 100% disabled veteran, and have fought for veterans' rights and better medical care and all this kind of stuff, that I'm now exposed to what they go through, because I am one, and it's horrible. It's horrible what they are, given the resources that we have in this country. But yeah, I think, things like what you're describing, angels will interfere when it's a life and death situation. They don't have to be asked. And that's the only time they will do that. And they did it with you. It was life and death. And they did it with me. They pulled before I ejected out of the Corvette convertible. I went through the windshield, butt up, and I got frozen up there. And I knew when I hit the ground, I was going to die. And I called out, God, help me. And that is the moment the angel, now my grandfather, came and took me. So I never felt any pain of death or hitting the ground or any of that. And so that's when angels will come and interfere, when it is life and death. But otherwise, we need to get in the habit of asking them. And I do this every morning to like cover my day. Angels, help me go through the flow, be with me, help the right opportunities. I ask, is there anything I need to say on this podcast today to help someone? I ask things like that because I don't know, but there could be one thing that comes out of my mouth that may help someone. And we just never know. So it's really important to start that conversation with them, because they want to help us. They really do.
I've been a speaker for Mothers Against Drunk Driving, Minnesotans for Safe Driving, and some other organizations for almost the entirety of my recovery from alcoholism. And that was another one of those synchronicities where to me, it's not central to your story as far as I'm concerned, because I've known so many people through MAD and the like that have been victims. They've gone through all these things, losing loved ones, having their own bodies so damaged they can't walk right again for the rest of their lives, and etc. A good friend of mine lost all of her memory from impact backward, etc. And her mom was just wanted to kill the guy that hit her. And after working on panels together with her mom for a few years, she one day said, and this ties into what you're saying about you praying that you help someone today and you're listening. What could I say? One thing. You've already said something that would help me. I won't go into it right now, maybe later if the door opens. But this woman said during a victim impact panel that she wanted to kill. She used to say, if I had a shotgun at the time that I realized I didn't recognize my own daughter in a hospital bed, because she left the room and said, "Listen, it wasn't her. You sent me to the wrong room. What's wrong with you?" And they looked at the chart and it was her. She went back in and she was so upset. She said, if the guy that hit her would have been in the room at the time and she had a double barrel shotgun, she would have pulled both triggers without hesitation. And then after a few years talking together, she said, just before I was going to speak, I was like, thanks for saying this before I'm going to speak, because now I can't talk hardly. But she said, she repeated that part and she says, but I no longer feel that way. And then turned around and pointed right at me and said, because of him. And my talking about forgiveness, I thought, was trying to help the offenders not do what they did again, because I'm a past offender. I drove under the influence and I killed someone. And I thought I was there to only stop people from doing what I did and make the mistake I made. And I never realized that it could actually help a victim, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
what is a victim but a word anyway? But, she somehow got to the point to where she could find forgiveness in her heart, and it brought her all this much more peace. And, you said one word earlier about the fragmentation, and I've heard that 100 times before because, I've worked in treatment centers and the like, but for some reason, it finally settled in to where a paradigm that I could grasp. And I've had someone tell me, my girlfriend always tells me, you've taken flight from your body or something, and you're not grounded and you're never here sometimes when it comes to certain things. And it's like, I never really believed her because I worked through my trauma so much, but I think there's still a part of me that hadn't really finished yet. We
Yeah.
always find deeper layers if we're being honest. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, here I thought I was past all that, but there's still some of that there. So thank you. Now I have something more to look at, and it's all your fault. No, just kidding.
No, but that's
Mhm,
what also I want to say is healing
mhm,
is not linear. We are programmed into this society that if we do A plus B, we're going to equal C. And I'm here to tell you that that's not true necessarily. Healing is not linear. You can go off in this direction. I mean, my 4 months in the hospital was up and down and up and down. And I got gangrene, I got sepsis, there were so many things that were going on with me. And I just lived in constant fear and that I wasn't going to make it the next day. And so, I have realized how much that has totally rewired my nervous system, hence my diagnosis only 3 years ago of complex PTSD. They have misdiagnosed me for 37 years, okay, with either anxiety or depression or all of that. But PTSD it's a different animal and it requires different treatment than normal depression or anxiety. And so I was finally able to get to see someone who said, Nicole, we're going to go a whole different way in your treatment. And it has helped me so much for it to be understood and me to go, okay, now I know what I'm dealing with. And then when I have a panic attack, how I can bring myself down and what the trigger is and how to soothe myself and get less and less in those, because it really, when you live with something for decades and decades, it takes a while for the body to heal itself, but it will, because the body keeps a score. That's a great book by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. And trauma will reside in your body, and emotions that are not expressed will stay in the body. And at some point, they need to come out and to be dealt with. And that is when a lot of times you'll start coming up with physical dis-ease that the doctors are not able to diagnose. And it really is emotions, or it's trauma related, or it's lifestyle or spiritual. And so you have to go looking in those areas, because your body's going to keep raising that red flag to say, hey, you need to heal this part. It's time to heal this wound so that you don't carry it forward and have to repeat this. And so we all have them. There's not a soul on this planet that doesn't have a wound of some shape or form. So, I want everybody to know that, and that there is hope, with this. And, I was just in the hospital last week because I got the flu. I'd had A, and then I had surgery, and then I got B, and probably from the hospital, but I couldn't breathe for 2 days. I had shortness of breath. And my greatest fear, I will tell you, Timothy, was not getting enough air. And that came from my accident, being on a respirator. When I woke up from surgery, my hands are tied down, and this machine is forcing me to breathe. I'm not breathing on my own. And so to me, that's always been the worst fear. And yet here it is playing out real time. 40 years later, it's the first time I've had something where I'm having labored breathing, and my PCP said, you got to go to the ER immediately because you may have a pulmonary embolism because you just had surgery. So I spent the day at the ER getting all these tests. And by the end of the day, my breathing had subsided because my husband worked with me on the emotions of, this is your fear, your greatest fear presenting. You're in a hospital, which is supposedly able to take care of anything. And at the end, the doctor comes in at 9 o'clock and he says, well, all your tests are clear. You're not going to die tonight. And I was like, well, thank you. But he actually said what I say in my book about dying, not to fear death. That lack of being able to get my breath did bring up more fear and allowed me to clear it and go, I still really was afraid of dying at some level if I don't get enough air, if I can't breathe. And so, I feel I've cleared it now, and my body's responding positively with some things that had been going on, some symptoms that I was like, why is this not going away? But that is at the root of my issue, was my parents blaming me and this sense of fear. So I knocked them both out in the hospital. And my husband's like, well, if that's what it took for you to get to that uh, trauma piece and to release it out of your body, so be it. So, I'm the first to say, anybody that said that they have got this figured out, here's the right prescription, go do it, run from them, because we're all here traveling this journey of soul evolution, all finding different modalities of healing. There's not one modality that's going to be instantaneous, or there's rarely one, let's just say that. And it's all a journey. And so don't get despondent, please don't get hopeless, because there are many trajectories that you can look at to help in that process.
I'm going to put up this picture here of the 10 common lessons, and I'm going to close off my camera here so you can see it. I don't know if you want to talk about any of these. I mean, you know them by heart anyway, but.
Yeah, I just want to mention a few that we are never alone. And I know during COVID, there was a lot said about people that were dying by themselves and that families weren't able to get to loved ones to say goodbye. We are never alone, because the spiritual realm is always with us, and the angels, deceased loved ones, it's just a really thin veil away. So we are, alone maybe in the physical sense of someone being there, but in the spiritual sense, their spirit lives on. So you are spiritually connected to them and can ask them to send you signs or whatever you want, and they will come forward with an answer. So that's why I say we're never alone, because we are all connected from a soul perspective. Another one is we're not judged. I know that in a lot of religions, you're taught that you're going to die and be judged on the other side. That's BS. I'm calling BS on that right now. You're not judged. Okay. What the mistakes that you made here were all part of your learning, and judgment is a negative thing, and that is not part of what is on the other side. But I will tell you, number 10, you will have a life review. Okay. And that is when you learn how everything that you did, said, and thought during this physical life here in Earth School, how it impacted ourselves, others, and the world, Mother Earth, sentient beings, all of those. So if you could learn to put all 10 of these lessons that it took me dying to learn and others dying to learn, if you could learn to practice them in your daily life now, you don't have to die to learn these. Your vibration is going to get higher. Your connection and confidence with yourself and others will be raised, and your awareness will start growing, and you will have a shorter life review.
Yeah, I can live with that. Yeah,
it's not easy. They're not easy to do.
Yeah.
But
if
really is.
If we face a lot of this stuff here now, while we're like in this body, then this is just a conclusion I came to. It's like when we take in the 12 steps, they talk about taking a moral inventory, a full moral inventory, and then get out loud about it. And share it with somebody, all of it, no holds, the whole 9 yards. And but at some point, well, I did that, but then at some point I thought, I wonder if that means that my life review is going to be shortened because I faced it now. It's like, so I don't know. I'm going to find out, I guess, but.
Yeah. And when I say a life review, what it is it's not something to fear. You're put in a position where you feel the feelings, or you feel the actions of what you did to somebody else. You feel it from their perspective.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it's about. So if you were Hitler, you're gonna feel all of that you did to others, the murdering and all of that. You're gonna see that, you're gonna sense it, you're gonna feel it, and you're going to be able to go, oh my God, how could I have done such a thing? So it's just played back from the other person that you did it to's perspective.
I think I've experienced some of that, and whatever I re-experience again later is fine. I have no control over it, I guess. Maybe I do or don't, doesn't matter. But I feel like I've really put myself in other people's shoes in a
Yeah.
lot of ways, like the harm that I've done, and the mother of the child that died in the impaired driving crash of mine. She and I are friends today, and she says she loves me and forgives me. But she also said it was the hardest day of her life, which I get. And
Yeah.
I had a experience. I did time for what I did while I was locked up, and there was a deep amount of grief, and it's just a long, long story that I won't go into. But I had such a broken heart, and I felt like I lost a friend that had just got hit by a Mack truck and he died. That's literally how I felt, and I ended up uh, uh, short story shorter, I died of a broken heart and my spirit left my body. And my heart stopped beating and my spirit left my body. And I never knew you didn't have to commit suicide. I just knew I didn't want to be here anymore.
Yeah.
And the broken heart, my spirit left. And then when I realized, oh my gosh, no, I'm not going out like this. I'm not going to let the things that people are doing to me, and it was mostly from the system. It wasn't even, fellow prisoners or anything. I just said no in the spirit mind, and my spirit slammed back into my body, and my body rocked, and then my heart started beating again, and I walked back and forth in the cell, and they had actually put me in a death row cell they called the hole for death row, and they were mad at me for some things, right? And but I took away a number of things. Like I no longer care about what they do to me in this world. I don't. They can steal
Yeah.
everything. They could pee on my Valentine's Day card, and it's like that's happened before, and they think they're being funny, or whatever. And the way they treat people can be pretty reprehensible. But it's like it took away a lot of the power of that. And it took dying and choosing to come back. Now, mine wasn't a full-blown NDE like yours, where you've gone to the light, you have all these much more significant, it's not a contest, but much more significant experiences surrounding it and more lessons and the like. I only got a couple of lessons out of mine because it was so brief. But we have a profound alteration in our reaction to life when something big like this happens, and you've had so many takeaways. But how do you want to keep living today? Because you know what it's like to be on the other side. Why do you want to persist? I mean, how do you give hope to people that maybe want to give up?
Well, I just share you hear this in 12 steps: experience, strength, and hope. On my book, one of my credentials that I put on there, it's probably my
Mm-hmm.
most important. You see, BTDT. Do you have any idea
Mm-hmm.
what that is?
I do, but I'll let you say it.
Been there,
Been there,
done
done that.
that.
We both said it at the same
Yeah.
time.
And to me, that's more important than any of the degrees that I got, because this experience was transformative. And anybody that experiences an out of body experience, spiritually transformative experience, or a near death experience, you come back transformed, whether you want to believe it or not, and you change. And as a result of that, you can either move forward with the changes or you can resist them. You have that choice. But I'm telling you, that's why I keep moving ahead, is because I now can trust the spiritual realm. They have got my back. They want what's good for me. And when you're living in fear, you don't believe that they want what's good for you. And so that is really important, is to get out of living in fear, especially if you've done it your whole life. And I feared my father growing up, then the military, and then it was the accident in my house. So, you know, I have learned to have to flip that switch, and it's causing me to live now in peace and in freedom. And as long as I can share this with other people, then, and give them hope, that's why I came back. Because if you are in fear when you die, you're resisting it, and your death is going to be much harder for yourself and everyone around you. So it's important to re-examine what your concept of God is. And in my opinion, if there's any fear attached to God, that is not of God.
Someone said, when light enters our body through the eye, it fills our body with light. And if what we stare at is darkness, then our body will be filled with darkness. And a woman I know who forgave the person that killed her son said that she wanted to forgive him because that's the discipline she grew up with. And she thought, you know, in the 12 steps, they say we believe in forgiveness, and her tradition happened to be Christian. And she said, both teach forgiveness. And now that my son's dead, what am I going to do? Tell him to go F himself, and that I wish he would go to hell, and, you know, or am I going to walk the walk? So she approached the guy at sentencing and says, I love you and I forgive you for killing my son, and gave the guy a hug, and he broke down crying. Might have saved his life for all we know, because we could kill each other with a word, or we can replace it with
Absolutely.
love, you know. And so she gave me a lot of reason to join in she's the one that got me to start speaking. And my first speech was in
Yeah.
91, right? But here's the thing. She said she needed this young person to see her eyes when she said it. She asked him to look at her, and he didn't want to, because this is a mom. But she said, and this is where you're going to see where we're going with this, but she said the eyes are the windows to the soul, and she needed to have him see that she meant what she said. But you have a very unique story about the eyes being the window to the soul as well. And it makes me, I keep wondering, I'm looking at your eyes and I go, which pupil was it? So
So this happened to me when the car crash happened. Some bystanders heard it. They came out to check me and the guy that was driving. They could not get any vitals on me. They called 911. They went in and got a blanket, covered me up. Took the first responders 10 to 13 minutes to get there. The EMT that looked at me pulled back the blanket, could not get any vitals on me, couldn't get an IV, couldn't get anything. So the last thing he knew to do was a sternal knuckle press, which in healthcare, if you know what that is, it's designed to elicit pain in the body. The only sign of life he got in me was my right pupil dilated. It flinched and dilated. And that's exactly what happened. Is my soul had left me. Okay. I was dead in the physical form. But at that moment, when he did that, my soul came back in through my right eye. And he was able at that point to get a blood pressure reading on me of 60 over 0. Now, that's still pretty life and death, because normal's 120 over 80. But he got some life back into me. And at that point, he said, Nicole, I was just trying to keep you alive. And he said it was unbelievable. So they did CPR for 20 minutes to the nearest community hospital, not even a trauma hospital. And the team of surgeons that were on call that night, that's when they had pagers back in those days, was excellent. And they just tried to get me stable that night. And the story goes on from there. And if any of your audience, if you go to my website, www.nicolekerr.com, I'll send you the first chapter for free, which is actually the accident and pictures. And there's pictures that are on the Audible. You will find that on my website under You Are Deathless, all the pictures that go along if you're doing the Audible version of it. Because I do put pictures of the crash in there, because sometimes a photo can say, it takes 1,000 words to say what's in the photo, like the crash, because as the sheriff said, that's unsurvivable. But I will tell you that the guy driving was drunk and he had minor injuries. So anyhow, that story with the eye to me was just amazing. And he will say it today, it was your eye that flinched, and that's when your soul came back in. And so it is true. It is remarkable, and I can't make this stuff up, and there's documentation. I have medical reports. I have, interviewed all my healthcare practitioners back then, and I have the district attorney report. I have all of that to back it up as evidence that all of this did happen.
Yeah, I think that's part of the questioning your convictions thing. Is like, it's true, but then you got to be meticulous in because when you go to sell something, they say, and I learned this when I was 16. I started selling shoes, and he said, find out what the objections are first, and then be ready to address them. So when they say blah blah blah, you can get right to the sales pitch by overcoming the objections. Well, you know how people think, and they can be very skeptical, and I think critical thinking is very useful to cover those things, but being closed-minded is a kind of skepticism I don't really want to live with. No. And it's not the philosophical skepticism of the ancient Greeks that I'm talking about, but the contempt prior to investigation type of skepticism that I'm talking about.
And that shuts down your evolution, because what we inherit from generation to generation to generation, you have got to start questioning that and those beliefs, because they're coming from very rigid and fixed belief systems for the most part. And so it's time to start doing it for yourself and to heal those generational wounds, because if you don't heal them and the trauma, you pass that on to your children and the next generation, because you have no compassion, sympathy, or empathy for them, because you never healed your own trauma wounds. You just expect them to get over it like you did, and you're fine. Well, you're not fine, is what I'm trying to tell you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, healed people heal people, wounded people, wound people. And, unless you've had a wound, there's nothing to heal from. So the wound is valuable. And I think Oprah said, make your wounds your wisdom.
Yes.
And, that made a lot of sense to me,
And nobody gets out of Earth School without being wounded, because that's how, unfortunately, we have to learn, is usually through suffering and pain. So that's why I wrote the book, and I hope it will be effective and inspiring to others, and it will maybe an alternative way for people to start looking at their relationship with themselves, with God, or whatever you want to call it, the universe, and where we go after here.
There's a couple of questions I tend to ask people that are on the show, and some people confuse it with ego, but I don't consider it that way. The question is, what is your superpower? And I know what mine is. Mine is not killing myself. Because I wanted to kill myself for a long time,
I can understand that.
Yeah. And I'm still here. So yeah. So what's your superpower?
Grit.
True grit.
Yeah.
I got grit.
Yep.
Reminds me of a line in a movie.
And that's not Girls Raised in the South, although I do have that. It's that perseverance, it's that the tenacity, the resilience, the courage, and the knowingness, I think all combined serves that word for me.
What are you most passionate about today?
Oh, that's such a great question. I'm passionate about this message, and that's why I love doing this. It has now become a vocation. I shut down my own business last year because it was just too stressful to try to do what I was doing, helping others, and to talk about my book. So I'm passionate about this subject matter, as well as just living life and finding a joy moment in life, when a lot of times your health. You don't know day to day what it's going to do. So when you're having a good day, to find the joy in that.
You've already talked about what values and guiding principles you like sharing with others, and the goddess of wisdom just entered the room. I'll see if I can introduce you. This is that. This is Sophie,
Hi,
Sophia,
Sophie.
the goddess of wisdom.
Yes,
She
she
has
is.
arrived.
She is.
Uh, and then we have a gold tabby we call Jimi Hendrix, just because when he was born, someone was listening to Jimi Hendrix. So, but what makes you laugh on Smile or Command? Is there such a thing? Because
I have two adopted Pekingese, and I've never owned dogs in my life. And when we moved here to New Bern from Hawaii 3 years ago, a man was giving them away, and so we adopted them. And one of them is handicapped, and when he broke his spine, and so he drags his back legs, and he's always so happy, and he is just such a gift. I think our animals are to us, about love and being there for us and always being happy. And all they require is a treat for the most part, And to know also that your animals do go over to the other side as well. You will see them on the other side. And that is a comfort, I know, for a lot of people, because that's the only unconditional love a lot of people have ever had is through their animals.
True that.
Yeah.
I think it took me a great many years to be able to love myself again. And, when I first started speaking, I wanted to kill myself for a great many years, but after a few months of feeling like that, I just told Mary Jo, the woman that got me involved in speaking, who forgave the guy. I told her a little bit of story. I said, I can't keep doing this. I didn't sober up and want to try to do this stuff so I can feel miserable and want to kill myself after speaking. And and she said, well, your problem is that you're walking with the enemy, and the enemy is you, and you need to do for yourself what I did for the young man who killed my son. You need to love and forgive yourself.
Yes.
And she gave me an assignment. You know what mirror therapy is, right?
Yes.
And I did that for mirror therapy for 8 years. She said, start your day, point in the mirror, say your name out loud, look yourself in the eye, and say, Timothy, I love you. And that's how you start your day every day until you rewire your brain, rewire your life. And you keep doing it until you believe it. Well, it took 8 years, but I didn't kill myself. Obviously, I'm still here. But the day that happened, Nicole, I got so happy that I looked in the mirror and I couldn't see the ex-convict. I couldn't see the baby killer. I couldn't see all these things that I had judged myself for. And all those things happened, but I couldn't see him. I just saw this love and this like mantle of peace around my face. And I went and shared that with a bunch of people before a meeting, and I said, check out this stuff. Y'all gonna love this. And I'm cleaning up my language, by the way. And I said this morning I looked in the mirror and there's like 8 or 10 people listening to me. Like I stopped their conversations. I said, this morning I looked in the mirror and I said, Timothy, I love you. And I meant it. I meant it. And I was so excited. They probably thought it was a Joel Osteen commercial or something. And this one lady took a hit off of her cigarette and blew a plume of smoke in the air. And she said, what, are you going to kiss yourself too? You know? And, and I wasn't angry with her. I was in such a good place. I knew she didn't understand. And 2 years later, to her credit, she came back. She says, you remember the day that I said, yeah. She says, I'm sorry, I didn't understand. And I gave her a big hug, told her I loved her. And it was terrific. I know you're waiting to say something important here because I can tell. I know the
No,
look.
no, well, it's just that's another one of the 10 lessons is loving ourselves and others is the most important thing we can do. And so when people are going, what's my purpose in life and all of that, it's number 4 right there on the screen. That is your purpose, is if quit judging yourself. Take that word shame out of your vocabulary. Do not shame yourself. Do not shame your children. Do not shame one another. Shaming people is absolutely the lowest vibration that you can do, and it always makes you feel like shit and crappy.
Mm-hmm.
And so nothing good ever comes out of shame and blame. So if you're doing that to yourself, like shame, that, with compulsive eating, I had that for 20 years. I wasn't able to let that go until I was 40 years old, and that's when I got married. And so it is, catch yourself. Whatever time you say shame, just back it up and go, wait, cancel, clear, delete. And what is it that you really want to, what do you really want to say? Because judging yourself, shaming yourself for your way you look, if you're overweight, if you, whatever it is not going to get you where you want to go. So take it out of your vocabulary, and you're going to raise your vibration and everybody else's around you.
I love it.
That's what I wanted to say.
Love it. Cancel, clear, delete. That's perfect. That'll be on my next blog post, I think. So that's a good one. And I've always kind of thought that the fourth step is like you find out all your stuff that you've done, and then that's where you capture it all on the computer, and then then at some point you're going into the alt delete, where you just remove it all.
Yeah.
And it changes. So I like that, control alt delete. I'm going to steal that from you. That's
You
good.
go right ahead.
All right, thank you. What would you tell your younger self? I know this is like typical questions, I suppose, but if you could elucidate for your younger self something that would help you today, what would it be?
To have trusted myself. I learned very early not to trust myself. And for that, I have paid a dear price, because I didn't become the being who I knew I could be. I became who my parents wanted me to be. And that caused that people-pleasing identity, which I know as a young child can save you, but as an adult, you feel like a roach that gets stomped on. You never get back anything in return for that. So I wish I would have learned that earlier, and to let go of the shame and the blame that my parents had placed on me earlier, and not taking that on. But we are where we're at. And that's the other thing I've learned, is you're absolutely supposed to be where you are today in your evolutionary process. So please don't judge it, and just be appreciative. Like 40 years later, I'm in the ER going, I can't breathe, and thinking I'm going to have an embolism and I'm going to die right there. And then I came through it all. The guy goes, you're so healthy. And it was really just an exercise in releasing the greatest fear I had. And so just be gentle with yourself, be compassionate. And like I said, not judging yourself is going to help so much, because there's so much judgment that we throw at ourselves and one another in this world. And, the military taught me we all bleed red. And at the end of it all, when someone is dying or someone is injured, your instinct is to go run, help them, no matter what their race, what their sex, what their political affiliation is, anything. That does not matter. They are human. They are a soul, a being, and we all want to help each other at an instinctual level. We get filtered and desensitized to doing that. And so that is what I want to tell people as well, is we really all are one. And if we could start treating our neighbors like the Bible says, love your neighbors yourself. Most people don't even know their neighbor, and so, they're simple things, but they're not exactly easy to implement. But if you can start living in that way and taking these small steps, your life will transform.
You talked about journaling. Are you still doing it?
I do it when I used to do it every day. Way back when Julia Cameron's book came out.
I love her work.
Yes.
No relation to me. I'm Timothy Cameron, but
Yeah. So back
Mm.
then, I mean, during those years where I felt so lost and empty and all of that, I journaled a lot more. And when I feel like I'm stuck today, I do. But I also have learned neuro emotional technique, which I did in practice for 8 years. And now I can do that with myself, and I can figure out what emotions going on that I'm getting triggered by, and I can help process that myself. So it's learning a lot of these different tools. There's EMDR, there's all kinds of things that are out there and
Can
available.
can you briefly describe for people that have never heard of it, what both of those things are?
Yeah, NET is neuro-emotional technique, and it's a mind-body stress technique that uses kinesiology technology, which is muscle testing, acupressure points, and psychology. And it's non-invasive, and it's been around about 30 years. And it helps you get at the emotion and the origin of when the event happened in your body where you got stuck. And then using the acupressure points and then your two emotional points on the top of your head, you breathe through that, because our breath is our life. And so as you put that picture of when you were 16 and this happened to you and you felt angry or whatever, you never allowed yourself to feel that back then. So it's able to pinpoint it right quickly what the emotion is and when it happened, going how far back. And it could be generationally, you're carrying something that's not even yours. It could be ancestral, or it could be a past life. So sometimes this is stuff you've been carrying through these different lives. And so that is available. Their NET website, Net Mind Body. EMDR uses a similar technique where you're going back through an emotion and you're replaying the incident, and you're using either tapping or you're using they have different things, it's like a light that you can look at, and it different ways for your hearing, your eyes, and your mind to connect to what that event is, to lower yourself on the scale to the point where it doesn't trigger you anymore. So and then there's hypnotherapy, there's biofeedback, there's just a lot of alternative and more complementary things are coming into the mainstream that are helping people. And even psychedelics are starting to show some positive impact on people with serious depression. And so I'm glad they're doing more research into that, because I know there's been a lot of people who have tried a lot of different things and nothing seems to work. But I also think that soul piece is extremely important. And if you haven't tried that, to really seriously think about. And prayer to me is a form of energy. So it's not about being in the prayer position that we grew up in. You had to be on your knees and like this, and at your bedside. And if your prayer didn't come true, well, were you in the prayer position? And I'm like, what the heck does that have to do with anything? But it's all energy. And so when you have that collective consciousness all focused on the same thing, then that's how change happens. So, I believe that's why your circle of 8, they're all focused on you at the same time with the energy. And that is important. And it's also important that you keep your own energy clear, that you're not picking up other people's emotions and energies and holding on to their energy or their emotions because they can't express it. So you got to really watch that, because that really will just deplete you, and you're actually feeling stuff that's not even yours. It's theirs.
I know that
And
one very well.
yeah, and they won't take responsibility for it. So you take responsibility, but you don't need, but it's not yours to own. So you have to really watch that, and watch those what do they call them? Energy vampires that are out there that will just suck the life out of you. So, there's a lot I'm studying energy medicine now, and I love it, because that's what we are, is energy, and how much we can do from the energetic standpoint to really help ground ourselves and to put protection around us and things like that. So, there's always more to learn and more to study, and just keep at this. And, there's new developments every day coming out with PTSD, with all these different trauma, repressed memories. A lot of people, like I didn't remember for 20 years, and people say, why not? And I said, I didn't feel safe in my body because I had my eating disorder. So of course I wasn't feeling safe for 20 years. I didn't feel like I had the resources to get the help, and you do need resources to help you through trauma wounds. And the other thing was my guides. You have angels and you have guides, and there's a whole host of angelic beings on the other side. But my guide said, it's time. It's time that you healed this and you get it out there. And I was like, okay, so they'll bring it up for you, even if you're not ready. So I always say, be gentle. I don't want to learn it in a harsh way. So ease and gentleness. And that's when I know something really is clearing, is that's when it happens.
I do remember in your story about the body having its memories, and that's kind of what unlocked it's like when your body was, when you're able to access your body, and then the things started opening memory-wise for you. And, what did that look like? I mean, I know that I hope you have time to continue.
Yeah, it started with chiropractic work, and that was mainly because I had, some injuries with my neck and stuff like that. So the chiropractic work helped, and then I got into group therapy. I initially got into OA, which is Overeaters Anonymous, which led me to group counseling and individual counseling, and cognitive behavioral therapy more so. And then I branched out into other alternatives. And I think I literally have tried everything out there in terms of biofeedback, you name it, acupuncture, all kinds of things. Been to all kinds of different doctors, and ultimately they all help to a certain degree, but the healing has to come from inside. And that's that love that you're talking about, of finally loving yourself, releasing the blame and the shame that I had unconsciously still been living with. And that has freed me up to just not care anymore what my family thinks or what my parents are saying or any of that. It's like, it doesn't matter anymore. And I am who I am. And it's time to move forward, because otherwise you keep living in the past and repeating that. And that does nobody, especially yourself, any good.
The inner world, is I am another you and you are another me. And in Lakesh and the Mayan tradition, they talk about that. I think there was a fellow that started Reiki. I don't know if you know his history at all, but he was a Christian missionary in Japan, and he was frustrated because he couldn't heal people like Jesus would heal people. So he decided, well, I guess this Christian stuff isn't working so good. And then he went on a mountainside, and he saw a vision of some symbols, and he held on to those symbols. But then there was a huge fire in a village, and he was healing people using those images that he saw, So, and that's not, I'm not berating Christianity or anything like that, but it's like, who are we to tell God how God should interact with anyone, is how I kind of view it. And it's none of my business what others think of me. It's not even my business what I think of me. It's my business what God thinks of me. And what God thinks of me is what God thought of me when I was originally created.
Yeah,
there's nothing,
that you're perfect.
Right. There's nothing to fix. Yeah.
That's why I'm calling bullshit on this concept of original sin. You cannot tell me that a baby that has just come out, being born through the birth canal, comes out and it's already got original sin in it. I'm just like, that never made sense to me. It is perfect. It's beautiful. It's holy. And, to already label it as bad is just a way
huge mistake. Yeah.
It's
People
a way
controlled.
to keep,
yeah.
Yeah, and to never build up your self-worth or just your
Hmm.
self-esteem, and Jesus even said, you can do all these things that I have done and even greater things.
Hmm.
But, there are
That's on
people,
my website.
yeah,
Sorry,
yes,
in different words. I don't know if you happen to take a peek at my website, but
yeah, but
you know.
it's true, So that's why I say, I love Jesus and he is a way shower to me. I wish we all would pay attention and live our lives the way he did. We would not be in the situation we're in
Mhm.
this world today if we all chose the decisions, made the decisions and choices and lived from his heart and the way
Mhm.
he did, because he taught some very universal principles that people want to pick apart now. And I am just like, especially the
Mhm.
judging bit. Judge not
Mhm.
lest you be judged. But there's so much judgment right now going on. But I have hope, and I believe that the light workers out here, the people that have come in, um, incarnated from other planets, incarnated that had higher vibrations, and the angels, that things are going and are in the process of transforming. Old systems are breaking down, new systems are coming up, that there will be equality, respect for Mother Earth, humanity, and all sentient beings.
Mama's just waiting for us to say okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
So do your
I,
part. Start
amen.
becoming awake.
Hmm. Christ consciousness, man.
Yes, yes.
I'm in that alignment. I wish I did it a little better some days, but that's the ego acting up. So I don't.
Well,
I
and
don't.
that's us being human, and that's
Hmm.
just it. Some days are better than others. The goal is this, but we're not perfect, and we never came here as perfect. And the whole idea of perfectionism, once again, is a false belief system that you have to get rid of, because it's sabotaging you from becoming who and what you were designed and created to become.
A ton of head ain't worth an ounce of heart,
That's true.
right? So
That's right.
she's co-signing it. You might not be able to
Yes,
tell, but there she is.
she is. I can
All
tell.
right. Yeah, real sunshine comes from the inside out. So, what we do with our stories and lives, I see us helping people, and I choose to believe the people that have told me that some of the work I've done is there's guys that said it saved their life, and they saved their own life. I'm not taking credit for it. I get all that.
Well, you're a
Uh,
channel. You're a
yeah, right,
channel.
right.
Yes.
I'm an
And
instrument or
yes.
whatever. So,
Yeah.
and it's like I heard someone say once, stop telling God how big your mountains are and start telling your mountains how big God is. But God is the mountain as well, and God can move the mountain, because it's like I'll get up and I'll go from here to there, and then we don't attribute that power as something that is out of our reach. It's totally there 100% of the
Yes.
time, and forgiveness
Yes.
was like the biggest mountain for me to deal with in life, and forgiveness of others as an abused person. And I had love placed in my heart when I just wanted to kill the person for years. And there's a miracle happened where the love was put in my heart, but it restored my heart to its original condition in that one area, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So and miracles will happen left, right, across, and hold. I don't know if you're a heart player, but
Yes, I
um,
do. But yeah,
yeah,
there's nowhere God is not. That's what I
amen.
say. There is, I think that's a
Mhm.
wonderful note to close on. There's just nowhere God is not.
All right, we're on that sacred path. You got it over your shoulder there. I've been looking at it the whole time.
Yes.
And you are deathless, as we are all deathless.
Yep.
Sophie is co-signing it again. Sophie's going to help sell your book later.
Okay.
Um,
This is
what?
it.
All right, and people can get it from where?
It's on Amazon. It's on Barnes and Noble. If you have an independent bookstore, they can order it. And you go online, and I'll send you the free chapter, and you can check out my website. And I'm also on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and just started on TikTok. So I'm not sure I'm on last on that.
I don't have TikTok. I don't think I do, but I do have others. So we'll make sure that the stuff gets out there, and I'll do my little part to throw that pebble of love into the pond and see where it ripples
Thank
to,
you.
and just never know when it's going to get,
No, we never do.
You know what I mean.
And that's the miracle and magic and mystery of life.
All right, sister, thanks for coming on the show. The Incomplete
My blessing.
Skeptic. Namaste.
Namaste to you.
Peace out.